Still on Afghanistan, last month was the deadliest for coalition forces since the campaign began, with 104 killed, most of them American. After almost a decade of combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, more than 5,000 US troops have been killed, but that tragic toll is dwarfed by the tens of thousands more who've returned home alive but horribly maimed. Many more again have been scarred psychologically. As North American correspondent Lisa Miller reports, it's a legacy that will haunt the nation for many years to come.
These are no ordinary cyclists. Their bikes are specially modified for amputees. After almost a decade of combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's no shortage of new members for this gathering of wounded warriors.
You don't come home the same way that you left, so it's just a daily challenge. You know, you can't just take it day by day.
Joseph Guyton was inside a truck in Kandahar when it struck an IED and he lost his legs.
Mine never goes away, but...
The newest member of this club is Edinger, who climbed on a bike just a month after being injured on his first tour of duty.
I stepped on a landmine that tore my foot to pieces to the point where they had to just take it off. I've been in Afghanistan for almost 8 months. So I could see the other side of the mountain, but I didn't quite make it there.
Lindsay, how did you feel when you heard the news?
There's worse. I think when you're expecting the knock on your door that he's not coming home, hearing that it's just a foot, which sounds terrible, but, you know, when you're expecting worse, it's definitely a fixable.
7 years of combat operations in Iraq cost more than 4,000 American lives, but more than 30,000 others came home wounded. After 9 years of war in Afghanistan, more than 1,000 US troops have been killed and almost 8,000 wounded. It's a war that's now dragged on for longer than Vietnam, with no end in sight.
The enemy's everywhere and nowhere. Always with you, but invisible.
In her book, The Untold War, Nancy Sherman ponders a modern conflict being fought by volunteers who represent less than 1% of the population.
So there's a new dimension. The dimension is that it's a very, very, very small number that are bearing the whole burden. And it's easy to ignore it.
It's a big day for Edinger.
For a guy who can't walk, getting a foot is like...
I know.
Christmas and your birthday all in one. Am I holding them flat? My hips?
He's being fitted for his first prosthesis.
Let's see,
Thanks. Thank you.
I'm flat right now.
No, it's definitely a little long.
Yeah. Okay.
In this room are hundreds more. They'll be attached to the stumps that remain on the battered bodies of America's troops.
This is what I see a lot of people's first ankles being.
This young soldier has now spent 3 months as an amputee.
You know, not everybody can just roll with it. It gets a lot of people really depressed. They've had instances where people, like, stop going to their appointments. You're not even supposed to have alcohol on post, but they'll sit in the room and drink because that's what they, you know, they're depressed and that's what they'll do.
It's very stressful. It's very hard. You know, he has moments of being pretty pissed. You know, he'll get up and be like, oh, okay, wait, hold on. And then he'll have to, you know, steady himself real quick or grab me or whatever.
Not all of the injuries suffered by US troops are so obvious. Many in the military are worried about the growing toll of mentally damaged veterans.
I've been with DOD individuals who have said that we're fighting wars on 3 fronts, really. Iraq, Afghanistan, and the war against suicide.
The military suicide rate is already at a historic high and it's still rising. In the 4 years since 2005, 1,100 members of the military have killed themselves.
My doctors tell me that my memory and attention problems are most likely due to a serious head impact I sustained and multiple concussive blasts while in Iraq.
We went with Bill and Pat.
It's no Hollywood blockbuster, but Glenn Close has come to Washington, D.C. to promote her latest film. amongst the audience, the people she's fighting for, the veterans she believes are part of an epidemic of brain injuries and mental health problems.
But it's a huge, huge problem. I was told, you say 120,000, I heard 130,000 of our soldiers have come back with it, and that's only the ones who have come forward and have been diagnosed.
That's confirmed by a recent Rand Corporation study that showed only half of those who suffered sought treatment.
We need to educate the American people, and we need to embrace these returning vets.
They call traumatic brain injuries the signature injury of these wars. One of America's most recognised journalists, Bob Woodruff, speaks from experience. A roadside bomb tore into his body while he reported from Iraq.
But in terms of something like PTSD, which is invisible, let's not forget that these guys not only are young that are going to serve in a war, they're voluntary. So we've got only about less than 2 million that are serving these two wars compared to Vietnam, which is about 12 million people. So they're young. That's why they need our attention when they come back.
There is a willingness within the most senior ranks to recognise that this time in America's military history is different to anything experienced before.
We have seen a rise in the suicides, and we believe that it reflects the severity of the situation that the soldiers are in.
Charles Callahan is the Deputy Commander of the National Naval Medical Centre.
Our system was set up to care for the soldiers on the battlefield, which we've done better than any time in history, transport them very quickly back to definitive care, which we've done better than we've ever done before, and then take care of their acute injuries. Where we failed was we failed to recognize that we had evolved into a rehabilitation center.
In his apartment near the hospital, Nick Edinger is determined not to be one of the victims of these wars.
I don't think about why did it happen to me, but I do often think about how much it sucks. There's nothing about it that's fun.
He declares himself mentally strong, but he is seeing a therapist.
It's just nice to be able to vent, and there are certain things about my personality that aren't what they used to be. I'm a little bit more confrontational than I used to be before.
Like so many other veterans, Nick Edinger has years of recovery ahead of him. But his Commander-in-Chief has warned he won't be the last to come home injured, or the last to struggle with the mental anguish of fighting these faraway wars.
Lisa Miller with that report from Washington. And now